Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you may be in the world. I'm Sarah Jane, and this is Thoughtful Nuggets and Pearls on Gift of Healing TV. The topic is the wisdom of our elders. Now, the reason this has become very prominent, if you like, in my own mind of recent months is because I've been invited to be one of 25 authors in a multi-author book that is coming out later this year. That's 2024. And its working title at present is Elder Wisdom. And this got me to thinking about how did we lose the connection to the wisdom of our elders. When we look back in history, especially with Indigenous peoples, who did they go to? They always went to their elders. Those that had lived, those that had experienced, and those that had listened to the stories and the wisdom of their own elders. The stories and the wisdom that got passed from generation to generation to generation. Why has this stopped in too many cultures? And this has been a question I've asked myself, and thoughts started to come. Now, I know this is more recent per se, but thinking about the First and Second World Wars and the traumas that not only the young men witnessed and were part of, but the families went through at home, the nurses and what they witnessed. And so many of those young men who came back, and the young women, and many who were part of it but weren't allowed to speak about what they were part of. And the youngsters, the young men and women, wouldn't and couldn't talk about it. Yet, is it about the experiences they have? Or is it about what they learn from those experiences? Is it about understanding the feelings that those experiences engender in us? Life today for the youngsters of today, because I cannot cast myself as a youngster anymore, which is why I'm going to be part of this book. But life today for youngsters is very different in a lot of the experiences than we experienced when we were younger. You know, we just got to think about telephones when we had to dial them. You know, we didn't have buttons to press. You know, sort of, we had a landline that had a cord on it and you couldn't move away from the phone. There have been computers, and being able to do the program I'm doing now just didn't exist for us. We went out and we played, we talked to each other. But the experiences we had that hurt us, that caused us physical and emotional pain, the feelings aren't any different. The experiences might be, but the feelings they engender aren't any different. If you're feeling hurt and pain, you're feeling unloved, unwanted, not good enough, unworthy, those feelings are the same feelings that the adults of today, the parents and the grandparents, and if you're lucky enough, the great-grandparents, have all been through. How come, and I think about this myself, I was as guilty. You know, my parents couldn't possibly understand what I'm going through. Why couldn't they? Because they had experiences. My parents had the experience of the Second World War. They were only children, but the experience I went through as a child, where I was separated from my parents, My father was, when I say separated from his mother died when he was 5. My mother's father had to go away to Malta and Gibraltar through the Second World War because he worked for Cable and Wireless, and therefore he was essential for keeping communications open. My parents, in their own way, lost a parent. The experience I went through meant it felt like I'd lost my parents. So actually, there are similarities. The feelings it must have engendered in them. But as far, I was way too young. They were a tiny bit older, but not a lot. And then we were children. We did not understand. And why is it we think that our parents and our grandparents can't understand the feelings? They can. And they had to work through it the way I had to work through it and come to understandings now that I could never have come to as a child. So there is so much. If only we would ask and listen. And yes, it is important for the more mature generations, that includes me and my own, to listen to our youngsters. But we do understand considerably more than they give us credit for. I'm very conscious of this because my mother is still alive. My father, bless him, isn't. And I literally was sort of in the car with her on a sort of 2.5-hour journey only a couple of days ago. And I sort of said to her, it's about, did you ever listen to stories from your grandmother, who was my great-grandmother? And I did meet her. She was somebody that, as a very young child, I did know. And she said, yes, she remembered some stories that Grandma Mags, as we referred to her, sort of had told her. And she was talking about, they had some, I think it was bantams she was talking about, so some chickens that used to roost on the top of the wardrobe in their bedroom at night. And this was my great-grandparents. And if you've ever watched the version of Pride and Prejudice with Keira Knightley, Donald Sutherland, and Matthew McFadden, very close to the beginning of that version of Pride and Prejudice, you actually see pigs walking through the house. Things have changed a lot. That is not likely to happen today, unless you're really unlucky, I suppose. But it was very much the norm that there were sections of the house going back generations that were for the livestock and sections for the family. They were under the same roof. Life has changed drastically. But did it start before the First and Second World Wars? Did it start with the Industrial Revolution, where we moved out of the fields and the countryside and moved into the factories and the towns and the cities, where we lost our connection to nature, that we then started to lose our connection to each other and the wisdom? And another thought that occurred to me, when we give our older generations, and I can understand that children would probably prefer to speak to and listen to their grandparents' stories than their parents. I get that. I was a kid myself. Being with my grandparents was usually a lot more fun, no disrespect to my parents, than being with my parents. But I think a lot of kids feel that about it. It doesn't mean that we don't love, respect, and care about our parents. It's just that parents are usually stricter than grandparents. But it's just thinking about asking them, sitting with them, listening to them. They have so much to share with us. And my mother is a great-grandmother. And I would like to think that I will learn some more from her. And I remember a few years ago that it just happened to be on her wedding anniversary, sort of since my dad died, and we were going to meet a cousin, and we drove through the village where they got married on the anniversary, and we were able to go into the church that my mother and father got married on the day and roughly the time that they got married. She talked about the fact when she was walking to school, there were days that they'd see Winston Churchill, that he lived in that area. And I don't know whether that was when he was Prime Minister, but she's got so much to share. And I hope that my nieces and nephews, because I don't have children, will think about listening, and I will encourage them to do the same. There are stories that my mother can tell. And my grandmother was left on her own for a number of years during the war. And she had chickens, and she was always a great gardener, and she grew so many of her own vegetables. And she was a trained nurse. And apparently she did so much to help the local community during the Second World War. A very strong woman that they had to be in those days. So I hope that I've given some food for thought here. That's the idea of, if you still have parents and grandparents, great-grandparents, open to the stories they can share with you. Because it is wisdom that we can listen to and hopefully learn from. Let us get back to some of the old ways that were actually good ways. Yes, we live in a modern world, but there is so much we can learn from the past that can prevent us from making unnecessary mistakes in the future. I hope that it has given you food for thought. Thank you for listening. And if you want to get in touch, please do, giftofhealingtv.com. And I will put, if you're watching this on YouTube, I will put a couple of links underneath so that you can get in touch. There is a contact page on the website. You can email. Please do. If you've got something you'd like us to share, ask us. You know, this is just my thoughts. This is something that's come about because of the book I'm going to participate in. Next week, we have a today's conversation, so it won't just be me. We're going to be talking about the importance and benefits of natural products. And our guests, so it's myself, Scott, and David, as usual for the Today's Conversation programs, and our guest, Julian Robarts. I hope you'll again consider think about joining us for that. Again, it's about what information has been passed down, what we are almost relearning. I hope that this has spoken to you and you will join us again. Take care, be safe, stay well. Love, peace and light. Namaste, sweet souls.